Bobby Almeida for MMA Island. And today I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing Phil Daru. And for those of you who don't know, Phil is CEO and founder of Daru Strong and current strength and conditioning coach for fighters like Dustin Poirier, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and Edson Barboza, just to name of his few clients, as well as being a former coach at American Top Team. So Phil is one of the most preeminent minds in the game, enabling fighters to take that physical leap in the octagon and taking that technique and allowing them to perform at their biggest. So thanks for joining me today. So my first question is kind of your athletic background coming from a D1 football career. What was the transition like going into mixed martial arts, and how did that experience help you become a better coach?
It was different from an energy system standpoint. Mindset still the same, still competitive, wanting to be the best that I could be, practicing and training and doing all the things that I need to from a physical standpoint and also from a mental standpoint. The one thing also is that, you don't have a team to rely on. It's kind of, it's an individual sport. The good thing, though, that I had was a good coach that started me out, Dean Thomas, and then I had a good team around me. More so, obviously, a team of individuals, but we all work together to help one another out. And that's usually how MMA does work. You have teams nowadays like Sanford MMA. Those guys do a great job out there. You have your American Top Teams. You have all your other gyms there that come together as a team. But again, at the end of the day, they got to step in the cage by themselves. So that was one thing that made that transition. One thing that helped me out was my ability to train hard and to trade with good intentions, I should say. As far as, like I said, the energy systems, with football, it's a repeat power sport. Primarily you're going 1,000 miles an hour and then you're able to rest for, 45 seconds to a minute even. With MMA, you have to constantly be flowing, but there's spurts of energy outputs in there. But again, you can't stop, obviously, right? And that was one thing that got me into trouble when I started training. I used to spar Dean. And Dean Thomas, if you guys don't know who that is, he's now a UFC analyst, but he was a UFC veteran. And at the time, he was almost right there in the prime of his career. So we would spar, and I would, go and do my little explosive power thing. And then from there, I'd kind of let off, and then he would just spark off on me because I was just, relaxing at times. And that's something you cannot do. The goal for MMA is to be able to sustain outputs throughout the entire time. So that transition, me understanding that helped me to put together a solid program and plan accordingly based upon the energy systems that are being worked on inside the sport.
And in terms of programming for, individual fighters, a lot of your clients are known for, having such a developed gas tank and being able to turn it on. I think of especially Joanna and Dustin, they get in those 5-round wars and their cardio seems to never fail. They're always able to recover and continue with those spurts deep into the 5th round. Are there specific kind of, when you're grading that programming, is there a base that you have to build first with, like, let's say more low intensity cardio and then building on that with other exercises? Or is that something that, comes more from MMA training versus strength and conditioning?
I mean, it definitely is both. I got guys that are naturally gifted. A young individual that's sitting next to me right now, Jared Gordon, has the ability to sustain outputs, right? He has a great gas tank just automatically. But what we want to do is we want to find his limitations. And when we find those limitations, whether it be a utilization issue, whether it be a respiratory issue, we want to hit on those particular things. And not saying that we're going to go away from what he's good at, just like any skills training, but we're going to aid and bring that up so that we can fill in those gaps. And so getting an assessment there, whether it's, an MAP or an MAS test, maximum aerobic speed test, something along the lines of that, testing, their blood markers, doing something like a NIRS device, which is a near infrared spectroscopy, where we're going to find out blood markers and read, where their limitations are. Then I can streamline the programming based upon that. But in all actuality, we're working concurrently throughout the year because they're going to be training this no matter what. For the most part, these guys are going to help their teammates spar. They're going to do some hard drilling. They're going to be in practices all year round. So we still want to make sure that they have the ability to do that. So it's going to take us to that range of making sure we have vertical integration, something like Charlie Francis has coined. But we want to work on that in a high-low approach, and we want to consolidate stresses throughout the week so that we don't overtrain, but we hit those things that we need to hit on every aspect.
And then in terms of designing training, in fight camp and out of camp, which is something you kind of just touched on a bit. That's kind of a unique challenge of MMA. You don't have a season and an off season. You kind of have these repetitive cycles that are going. How do you program differently, especially in terms of load, in terms of volume, but also, trying to allow fighters to grow as much as they can kind of in those off season in between camps?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, a lot of guys are fighting on short notice, trying to take as much fights as possible. But if we do have a significant time where we can bring people up, we still work on what we call a condensed conjugate, something I coined a long time ago. Basically, what I did was I took the conjugate model and I condensed it into 2 to 3 days. And so they'll be doing dynamic effort, max effort, or sub-maximal efforts in those same training weeks. And then the energy systems are concurrently trained throughout the weeks as well. Now, if an individual needs to come up in, let's say, for instance, he needs to build some hypertrophy, he needs to build some muscle to get to the upper weight class. Well, now we're going to be doing a little bit more volume, but we're still going to sustain and maintain plyometric movements, either low level, high level. We're going to be working on ballistic movements just to make sure that they're maintaining that power and they're able to turn it on when the time comes, getting closer to the fight. So, when it comes down to programming in general, it's specific to the individual based upon the demands and the methods. But let's say, for instance, we got guys that are training together, but they have fights at different times. Right now, I have Brandon Allen and I have Randy Costa fighting in the same card, July 24th. But I have Jared fighting on October 2nd. They're all training in the same group, but again, they're doing different things at different times. The exercises may stay the same, but the methods are going to change based upon their time frame.
And then just in terms of, fighting and competing across different weight classes, what are some additional challenges, working with such a diverse set of clients where you have some, in lighter weight classes, some, especially I'd imagine as you get up to light heavyweight and heavyweight, the game changes in terms of the pace, it changes in terms of type of techniques that they can employ, just the sheer physics of moving a body that size is so different. How do you approach that to try to enable them to continue developing their game, even at higher weight classes?
Well, with the higher weight classes, obviously, it can be ended really quickly, right? So my major goal with a lot of the heavyweights, when I had Junior Dos Santos, when I had guys, even like Alessio Sakara, he's a bigger guy. Our goal was to make sure that they had power, but also power endurance. So even if it does go to the later rounds, they still can sustain that power output. So maximal strength was a key, and then also improving on their power output throughout a long duration. If they're doing 5x5s or 3x5s, whatever the case, we still want to make sure that they have the endurance to do so. So that was my major thing. And obviously, they're going to always have a strength increase just by basically moving with load. A lot of these guys haven't been in the weight room ever in their life. So if we throw something new at them from an adaptation standpoint, that stimulus is going to help them adapt very quickly. And so for that, it doesn't take much for a guy to get stronger and then to use that strength and put it into more speed to develop that power output. When you got a lighter weight class guy or a female, a lot of times we still need to develop strength, right? That's kind of the missing factor. They probably come in there already with a great gas tank. They have high amounts of energy. I rarely have a guy that's in a lower weight class that can't sustain outputs. But if there's this sort of weakness there, we want to make sure that we're working on that. And again, I'm not trying to simulate inside the weight room. That's not the goal here. The goal for them is to, work on things from a controlled environment that is going to enhance their game. So they'll be working a lot of that game plan inside of their training world. But for us, the goal is to get them ready as an athlete. And so for that can carry over into the sport. So when it comes to the lighter weight guys, like I said, it's just going to be more repeat efforts. But again, we also want to make sure that they have the strength to sustain that output.
What ways do you kind of try to improve the longevity of fighters' careers, especially because, they might come to you with a kind of laundry list of injuries already? I know, for example, Chris Weidman, you have somebody who has just like superhuman toughness, but at the same time has just gone through so many surgeries, so many injuries, has so many chronic issues. What are some ways that, you try to improve the quality of a fighter's performance for as long as you can?
Well, the good thing now is that I have a team of coaches here that help me out. But in the beginning, when it was just by myself, is getting a solid understanding of the athlete first and foremost, getting a movement assessment down, seeing where their deficiencies lie, where the compensation patterns. There's always going to be bumps and bruises in the sport. I mean, 100% of the time, somebody's going to come in here with something wrong with them. And you just got to be able to auto regulate appropriately so we can keep the progressions going in the right direction at least. And then you work around that. But at the same time, we want to increase mobility. We want to increase in-range control. We want to give them the joint prerequisites to do the work ahead, and never give them an exercise that they can't really do. I know the good thing now is that I know my athletes very well. They come to me consistently. When I was with another team, I was getting, fighters coming new to me each and every week. A lot of guys would come for like 2-week camps, 4-week camps, and I didn't even really know their names. And so that was very hard. And I had to make sure that we were giving out exercises that, with the highest reward, lowest risk. And still to this day, we do that, but I can push the pace a little bit harder now because I know the individuals in and out. And if they do have some injuries or anything like that, we have massage therapists, we have movement specialists here that definitely help me out entirely, man. It's a game changer for me and for my athletes. But, in the beginning, like I said, it's just kind of finding out what their problems are. And then if you come in and you can't really stop, a bum elbow or, a rolled ankle or something like that. And you just got to work around that. But because they're going to want to train no matter what, and even if they can't do something and they see they can't do something, just from them being who they are, they're going to want to do it. So we have to make sure that, again, we're putting them in the right position, not to get injured, but also get the adaptation that was necessary for them.
And then in terms of nutrition and cutting weight, is that something that you try to involve yourself in, or is that a process? I mean, certainly that you're going to have to plan around, not many strength and conditioning coaches have to deal with their athletes, putting themselves through just intense dehydration days before what's supposed to be their peak performance. So what's your experience been with that?
Yeah. In the beginning, like I said, I had to do some of the weight cuts. Now we again have a guy in house, and then work closely with people like George Lockhart and those individuals. But when it gets closer to the fight, a lot of the things we do, we taper down volume highly. We taper down the frequency, and we make sure that we're getting what we need and getting them out of there. 30, 45 minutes tops, but it's highly intense. It's intense enough to where it's going to simulate to a degree the experience that they're going to have inside the fight itself. But we don't want to give them any more than that, right? So, going longer for sake of trying to kill them it's pointless. At the end of the day, you're going to run people into the ground. There comes a time where you have to do that, where they actually have to gain that high frequency, high volume type work to build a base. But at that particular time, you're looking at 2 weeks out, 1 week out, even, basically our job is done. The goal really is to maintain what we've gained throughout the entire camp, if we have the ability to do so. So 2 weeks out, they're tapering down, and, a week out from the fight, usually I'll do a hard circuit where it's simulation. And what I mean by simulation is the movements. I'll see you later. The movements and everything else are going to be similar from a biomechanics standpoint of what they're going to be going through inside the fight, but not directly, right? The good thing about me and a lot of my coaches too, they train or they've fought. So we can get them in there and we can do pad work with them. We can grapple with them. We can, go from a grappling situation to a prowler push. And that's something that they're not used to from that perspective, but it's going to get them better because it's an overload at that particular time. Again, we're keeping it in the same time domains as what they're going to fight, whether it be a 3-rounder or a 5-rounder. It gives them the ability to feel that pressure and then get them out of there, and then a lot of it's going to come down to, all right, now you need to recover. And when you're minimal with your calories and your water loading and all that stuff, all that great stuff that you have to do when you weight cut, you definitely don't want to be in there for too long, so the mindset is one thing too as well. I mean, a lot of it, I hate to say mindset, but it's neural, and it's your ability from a psychological standpoint to withstand the pressure, right? So, we work a lot into that, as far as me coaching, that's really my realm, now getting a little bit older. I take a step back a lot of times. I got a lot of things I'm doing now these days. So it is good to have a team of coaches that can take care of the minute details when it comes down to like exercise selection and everything else. And I'm mostly there to make sure that auto regulation is appropriate for that individual, reframing things so that they understand what's going on, more from a coach's perspective. I know I'm getting into a tangent, but you get what I'm saying, basically.
And then just in terms of, for some of the higher profile fights, when, a fighter is going to have an opponent months out. As a strength and conditioning coach, when you look at certain opponents, let's say with Dustin and Connor, a fight that's on everybody's mind, you have two individuals that, are at peak form, but with Connor, there's certain physical strengths, that explosiveness in the first few rounds. Is that something that, you're going to try to prepare Dustin specifically for, trying to increase that performance and letting him match that? Or is it more, okay, that's his strength, let's develop yours?
Yeah, I've never done that with Dustin, man. When you have an individual like that, that's a phenomenal fighter, you kind of let them do their thing. The thing that I'm going to do for them is the thing that I know that they can't do outside of what I can give them. So for Dustin, primarily it's slowing him down a lot of times. He goes balls to the wall when it comes down to sparring, when it comes down to grappling, things he does with Mike Brown and Dia Davis and Thiago Alves, like they're running him through the ground when it comes, and in a good way, don't get me wrong, when it comes down to the actual training for the skills and for the techniques and strategies that he's going to have to do inside the fight. For me, when he gets into the weight room, or when we're doing some conditioning here, the goal really is to, one, make sure that I'm, again, doing things that he's not going to get inside the skills training, and allowing him to be a better athlete, to feel his body move in all different directions and be strong in those directions. Working on, speed of the sport in a sense, but doing it from directions and ranges that he's not accustomed to doing, because of the fact that he favors certain positions. So I get him out of those favored positions and I make him be strong, powerful, fast in other positions. This way, if he does end up getting in those positions, he's capable of withstanding those loads and understanding how to produce force from that position. So those are some of the concepts we utilize. Mobility is obviously a key for me. He's had, problems with his hip for his entire career. He just recently got it worked on. So now we found some new ranges that we can actually get into. And he's not, stuck in those positions. And now we can start to work in and get him stronger, work on muscles that he hasn't been able to turn on because he couldn't get in those positions. And when it comes down to his conditioning, a lot of the times he has a great overall, and we talked about oxygen delivery. He has a good aerobic capacity. But the one thing that I want him to be very good at is utilizing oxygen very fast. So his anaerobic, alactic capacity type work is very important for us. His power endurance is definitely going to be something that we want to take control of. The thing with, like, withstanding Connor's power and everything else, like that's going to come with, cage awareness. That's going to come with agility. That's going to come with, his skill set. I may enhance his agility through certain means of training. I may work on his footwork, make him a little bit more twitchy and fast. That's what I can do for him. But he needs to work that inside the sparring, and he knows that, So the main things that I work on with him, like I said, is mobility, understanding his body in space, working on being twitchy and fast and explosive in all different directions, and then also repeat power energy, so that he can do this throughout the entire 5 rounds. There hasn't been, actually, we've this is our 10th camp, I think 11th maybe, and I couldn't remember a time where he didn't do 5 rounds. So my first fight with him, I believe, his first fight, it was what was it? I think it was right after the Michael Johnson fight. He lost that fight and then called me the next day. He actually called me on Sunday, and we started working ever since. So, it's been a solid 5 years and 10 camps, and every fight has been a 5-rounder, give or take, I believe. So he's always had that, and we've always worked in those ranges. Like there wasn't a time where it wasn't a 3-rounder. So, the goal really for us, again, like I said, is doing that, making sure that he's not overtraining himself, talking him out of situations too as well, because he feels, how fighters are, man. They feel like they have to train hard every time, and I'm still to this day. I'm still like that, and I'm a coach, and I understand this shit, but yeah, just kind of pull him back and make sure that he knows that he's doing the right things when he's actually resting, because resting, in my opinion, is a part of training. It's a part of getting better.
So, I think you've alluded to it a bit, but in terms of your own personal perspective as a fighter and a coach, what are some of the ways the game has really changed over the last decade, and what are ways you think it's going to change?
Just like the progression of the world, man, we're understanding more from a technological perspective. There's new research out, there's smarter people coming into the sport. So, testing, understanding energy systems, understanding biomechanics of the sport, the physiology of the sport. It's definitely good. The add-on with the UFC PI has helped us with, studies and research on athletes inside the fight at the highest level. So now you can kind of taper and cater your way through progressions and programming based upon their findings and research if you don't have the experience or don't have the athletes to do it with. The good thing with me was I was able to work with 60 to 80 fighters, in a given week. And I was able to gain that experience alongside the UFC PI with all those guys getting it together. And so I kind of developed a methodology and a protocol based upon that, and it's always changing. It always will change. If you don't progress, you don't adapt, then you're ultimately going to degress. And we don't want that either. We want to make sure that we're always getting better. The one thing I can say, like I said, is that you got guys that are highly intelligent coming into the sport. You got guys that have experience in the sport, like myself, and then also read a couple of books too as well, so they understand the concepts. So when you have that experience and you have that academic understanding, or you have the knowledge there from a deep science perspective, and you can correlate that into the training programs. And the one thing that is missing that I do see is that understanding the athletes are important. Communication, the psychology of the athlete. That's one thing that's highly missed. I get guys coming from school, straight out of college, have degrees in exercise science, have the NSCA, CSCS, but they don't know how to coach because they don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to reframe. They don't know how to auto regulate, and those things you have to get on the floor. But once you get that, though, then you have a well-rounded system for yourself, and you can improve upon that. And fighters are different, man. Fighters are definitely a different breed. I work with boxers too. I work with judo. I work with wrestlers. I work with BJJ athletes. But I work with high school football players, and I work with celebrities, and they're all different, in their own way. They're all crazy in their own way too as well. But when we talk about fighters, they're so in their head a lot of times. You have to put you know put yourself in their shoes, because not only are they training hard two times a day, they have to get ready to step in a ring or a cage or on a mat and physically be ready to defend themselves, pretty much, right? So you have all that going in there, and then you have the weight cut. You throw that on that, and so there's a lot of things that they have to deal with. So I mean, you just got to put yourself in those shoes, and that's where, again, like I said, when you have the experience in and out of the cage and on the gym floor, it's going to help you out a lot.
I know you've just recently opened a few more facilities in South Florida. Best of luck with that. We look forward to seeing your and Dustin's work on July 10th. I'm sure the whole world is waiting with bated breath after, Dustin really came out and shocked the world the last time.
Yeah.
I know I personally was screaming on my couch with my entire watch party chanting my name. I bet on Connor to win. But, I've learned my lesson. I'm never betting against Dustin again. And I look forward to seeing your work. So thank you.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.